April 6, 1941. Dawn breaks over the mountains of northern Greece and Yugoslavia. The rumble of engines shatters the morning silence as German armored columns cross the borders simultaneously from Bulgaria, Romania, and Yugoslavia. Luftwaffe bombers darken the skies over Belgrade, Athens, and Thessaloniki. Operation Marita, the German invasion of Greece and Yugoslavia, has begun. For the Greeks, this marks the latest chapter in a conflict that started 6 months earlier when Mussolini's Italy invaded from Albania. The Greeks had fought magnificently, driving Italian forces back into Albania in one of the first Allied victories of World War II. Their success humiliated Mussolini and infuriated Hitler. Now, as German panzers roll across the frontier, Greece faces an enemy far more formidable than Italy, the Wehrmacht, fresh from crushing France and dominating Europe. The stakes extend beyond Greece itself. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill has sent 58,000 Commonwealth troops to support the Greeks, hoping to create a Balkans front and demonstrate Allied solidarity. German forces number over 680,000 men, supported by 1,200 tanks and 1,000 aircraft. The Greeks and their British allies can field approximately 430,000 troops with minimal armor and air support. The disparity in mechanization and air power is crushing. What unfolds over the next 3 weeks will demonstrate both the courage of Greek and Commonwealth forces fighting against impossible odds and the devastating effectiveness of German combined arms warfare. This is the story of how Hitler's forces conquered Greece in 24 days, drove British forces from continental Europe, and set the stage for one of the war's most dramatic airborne assaults. The road to Operation Marita began on October 28, 1940, when Italian forces invaded Greece from Albania without warning. Mussolini, jealous of Hitler's conquests and eager to prove Italian military prowess, launched the invasion with supreme confidence. He expected Greek forces to collapse within days, giving Italy a quick, glorious victory that would enhance Italian prestige. Instead, the Greeks fought back ferociously. Under General Alexandros Papagos, Greek forces not only halted the Italian advance but counterattacked with devastating effect. By mid-November, Greek troops had pushed into Albania, capturing strategic towns and inflicting severe casualties on Italian forces. The Greek success was remarkable, a small nation of 7 million defeating an army fielded by a great power of 45 million. The Greek victories over Italy resonated throughout the Allied world. In Britain, Churchill celebrated the Greek resistance as proof that Axis powers were not invincible. American newspapers praised Greek courage. The phrase, "Greeks don't fight like heroes, heroes fight like Greeks," entered popular consciousness. For the first time since the war began, an Axis aggressor had been decisively defeated. But Greek success contained the seeds of disaster. Mussolini's humiliation infuriated Hitler. The Italian failure in Greece threatened German strategic interests in the Balkans. Hitler was planning Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, scheduled for May 1941. An unstable Balkans threatened his southern flank. British forces in Greece could strike Romanian oil fields at Ploesti, Germany's primary petroleum source. Most critically, Mussolini's incompetence forced Hitler to divert forces southward when he wanted them concentrated against Russia. Hitler decided to eliminate the problem decisively. In December 1940, he ordered his military staff to prepare for simultaneous invasions of Yugoslavia and Greece. The operation would secure Germany's southern flank, rescue Italian forces, eliminate British presence in the Balkans, and demonstrate German military supremacy. Field Marshal Wilhelm List would command the operation, leading the 12th Army with powerful panzer and mountain divisions. When Hitler's intentions became clear, Churchill faced an agonizing decision. Intelligence indicated German forces massing in Bulgaria. The Greeks requested British assistance. Churchill wanted to honor Britain's commitment to Greece and believed a Balkans front might deter German aggression or at least delay it. However, British resources were severely limited. General Archibald Wavell, commanding British forces in the Middle East, had just achieved spectacular success against Italian forces in North Africa. Committing forces to Greece would weaken his position in Libya, potentially allowing German forces under Erwin Rommel to gain advantage. Military advisors warned that defending Greece against Germany was likely impossible given the terrain, lack of fortifications, and German superiority in armor and aircraft. Churchill overruled practical objections. Political and moral considerations outweighed military pessimism. Britain had guaranteed Greek independence. Abandoning Greece would damage British credibility and potentially push other nations toward accommodation with Germany. On March 7, 1941, the first British troops landed in Greece. Eventually, 58,000 Commonwealth troops, British, Australian, New Zealand, deployed to Greek Macedonia. The defensive plan was problematic from inception. Greek forces were exhausted from 6 months fighting Italians in Albania. Most of Greece's best divisions remained committed against Italy, unable to redeploy eastward without risking collapse of that front. The terrain of northern Greece, mountains, narrow passes, few roads, favored defense but also limited mobility. The Medixus Line, a series of fortifications along the Greek-Bulgarian border, seemed strong but was undermanned. Most critically, Yugoslavia's position remained uncertain. If Yugoslavia allowed German forces transit or collapsed quickly, German armor could outflank Greek defensive positions through the Monastir Gap. The entire defensive scheme depended on Yugoslav resistance, a fragile foundation given Yugoslavia's internal political tensions and military weaknesses. Field Marshal List designed Operation Marita with characteristic German thoroughness. His 12th Army, positioned in Bulgaria, would attack on multiple axes simultaneously. The 2nd Panzer Division and supporting units would strike through Yugoslav Macedonia toward Skopje and Monastir, outflanking Greek positions. The 18th Mountain Corps would assault the Medixus Line fortifications directly. The XL Panzer Corps would drive toward Thessaloniki, Greece's second city. The plan exploited German advantages in mobility, firepower, and air superiority. Luftwaffe units would establish air dominance immediately, destroying Greek and British aircraft on the ground and interdicting Allied movement. Panzer divisions would exploit breakthroughs, racing deep into enemy rear areas to encircle and destroy Allied forces before they could establish new defensive lines. Mountain troops, specially trained for alpine warfare, would reduce fortifications that armor couldn't reach. Simultaneously, German forces would invade Yugoslavia. The Second Army would strike from Austria while the 12th Army attacked from Bulgaria. Belgrade would be subjected to massive aerial bombardment, Operation Punishment, in retaliation for Yugoslavia's recent coup that overthrew the pro-Axis government. The dual invasions would overwhelm Allied capabilities, preventing concentration of forces against either thrust. German intelligence had thoroughly reconnoitered the terrain. Agents had mapped Greek defenses, identified weak points, and prepared detailed plans for every phase of the offensive. German forces enjoyed overwhelming advantages: 1,200 tanks versus fewer than 100 Greek tanks, 1,000 aircraft versus approximately 200 Greek and British planes, complete motorization versus Allied forces largely dependent on animal transport and foot movement. At 5:15 hours, German forces attacked across the Bulgarian frontier. Luftwaffe bombers struck Athens, Piraeus port, and airfields throughout Greece. In Belgrade, waves of bombers devastated the Yugoslav capital in an attack so fierce it entered history as one of the war's most destructive single-day bombings. 17,000 civilians died in the raids. The Yugoslav government and military command structure disintegrated. Along the Medixus Line, German mountain troops attacked Greek fortifications with ferocious determination. The forts, built into mountain ridges and heavily armed, resisted tenaciously. Greek defenders fought with extraordinary courage, repelling initial assaults and inflicting significant casualties. Fort Rupel, the line's strongest position, withstood repeated German attacks. German commanders, expecting quick reduction of the fortifications, found themselves locked in bitter combat. But elsewhere, the German offensive achieved rapid success. The 2nd Panzer Division, driving through Yugoslav Macedonia, encountered minimal resistance from collapsing Yugoslav forces. By evening of the first day, German armor had advanced 40 miles, far exceeding planned objectives. The path toward Monastir Gap lay open. Greek forces positioned to defend against this thrust found themselves outflanked before they could properly deploy. At Thessaloniki, the XL Panzer Corps pushed toward the city against stiffening Greek resistance. The Greeks, fighting to delay German advance and protect the city, conducted fighting withdrawals but could not stop German armor supported by overwhelming air power. Yugoslav resistance along the Greek-Yugoslav border collapsed completely, exposing Greek flanks. British forces, positioned around Mount Olympus in central defensive positions, received fragmentary reports of German progress. Communication difficulties, limited radio equipment, reliance on telephone lines easily cut, meant Allied commanders operated with incomplete intelligence. What was clear? German forces were advancing faster than defensive plans anticipated. On April 7th, German forces achieved critical breakthroughs. The 2nd Panzer Division burst through the Monastir Gap, outflanking the entire Greek defensive position in Macedonia. Greek forces, threatened with encirclement, began withdrawing southward. The movement, conducted under air attack and with limited transport, quickly became chaotic. Units lost contact with higher headquarters. Supplies ran short. German aircraft strafed columns of retreating troops. Thessaloniki fell on April 9th. The XL Panzer Corps entered the city after Greek defenders, recognizing the hopelessness of their position, surrendered. The fall of Greece's second city was both militarily and psychologically significant. German forces now controlled the primary port and communication hub of northern Greece. More critically, the Medixus line fortifications, still holding out heroically, were now isolated and irrelevant to the broader battle. The fortresses of the Medixus line continued fighting with remarkable determination. Fort Rupel and other positions repelled assault after assault. German mountain troops suffered heavy casualties attempting to reduce the fortifications. However, by April 10th, with Thessaloniki captured and German forces bypassing the line entirely, continued resistance became futile. Greek commanders at the forts, ordered to surrender, did so only after securing guarantees that their troops would be treated with full military honors. German officers, impressed by Greek bravery, granted these honors. The collapse of Yugoslavia accelerated Greek difficulties. Yugoslav resistance disintegrated faster than even German planners anticipated. On April 12th, Belgrade fell. The Yugoslav government fled into exile. Yugoslav forces, torn by ethnic tensions and lacking coordinated command, surrendered in masses or simply dissolved. The rapid Yugoslav collapse meant German forces could concentrate overwhelming strength against Greece. British and Commonwealth forces, attempting to establish defensive positions around Mount Olympus, found themselves threatened from multiple directions. The original defensive plan assumed Greek forces would protect the flanks. Instead, Greek divisions, battered and disorganized, were withdrawing southward in increasing disorder. German armor, advancing through the Monastir Gap, threatened to cut off Commonwealth forces entirely. On April 12th, General Henry Maitland Wilson, commanding Commonwealth forces, made the painful decision to withdraw to new positions at Thermopylae, the historic pass where Leonidas and his Spartans had made their legendary stand against Persia in 480 BC. The withdrawal would be conducted in stages, with rearguard actions to delay German pursuit. It was acknowledgement that holding Greece was impossible. The goal now was to evacuate as many troops as possible before German forces trapped them. The withdrawal from the Olympus line to Thermopylae covered over 60 miles through mountainous terrain, pursued by German armor and harassed constantly by the Luftwaffe. Australian and New Zealand units fought desperate rearguard actions, holding German forces at narrow passes and bridges, then withdrawing before being overwhelmed. The fighting was brutal and losses heavy. At Vevey Pass, Australian troops held against German armor for 2 days, destroying multiple tanks and inflicting significant casualties before withdrawing under cover of darkness. At Crete Pass, a mixed force of British and Greek troops delayed German advance for 36 hours. These rearguard actions bought precious time for the main force to withdraw, but the cost in killed, wounded, and captured was severe. German forces, despite their advantages, found the pursuit challenging. Greek terrain, mountains, narrow roads, limited mobility corridors, restricted armor employment. Demolitions carried out by withdrawing forces destroyed bridges and blocked roads. British and Commonwealth troops demonstrated skill in defensive warfare, maximizing terrain advantages and inflicting disproportionate casualties on advancing Germans. The Luftwaffe dominated the skies completely. The few remaining Greek and British aircraft were shot down, damaged beyond repair, or withdrawn to prevent capture. German Stukas and bombers struck retreating columns, destroying vehicles and supplies. German aircraft attacked ports where evacuation preparations were underway, sinking ships and creating chaos. By April 18th, Commonwealth forces had reached Thermopylae. The position offered better defensive terrain, a narrow pass between mountains and sea, historically proven defensible. Here, Wilson hoped to hold long enough to organize evacuation from southern Greek ports. Australian and New Zealand brigades prepared positions while engineers mined approaches and prepared demolitions. The Greek government and military command faced collapse. Prime Minister Alexandros Korizis had committed suicide on April 18th, unable to bear the disaster overwhelming his nation. General Papagos, recognizing that continued resistance would only cause more Greek civilian casualties, recommended surrender. The Greek army, having fought magnificently against Italy and courageously against Germany, was disintegrating from exhaustion, lack of supplies, and overwhelming enemy superiority. German forces assaulted the Thermopylae position on April 24th. The 5th Panzer Division and supporting units attacked frontally, while mountain troops attempted to outflank through the mountains. Commonwealth defenders fought tenaciously, holding the pass against initial German assaults. However, German forces, probing for weaknesses, discovered routes through the mountains that outflanked the main defensive positions. Faced with encirclement, Wilson ordered evacuation to begin immediately. Operation Demon, the seaborne evacuation of Commonwealth forces from Greece, commenced on the night of April 24th. Royal Navy ships, operating under constant threat of German air attack, began embarking troops from beaches and small ports throughout southern Greece. The evacuation would continue for 5 nights. The scenes at evacuation beaches were chaotic yet orderly. Troops lined up in darkness, wading through surf to small boats that ferried them to waiting destroyers, cruisers, and transports offshore. German aircraft attacked relentlessly during daylight hours, sinking several ships and killing hundreds. At night, the naval vessels moved inshore, embarked as many troops as possible, then withdrew before dawn. The Royal Navy demonstrated extraordinary courage and skill. Destroyers and cruisers, vulnerable to air attack in confined waters with limited maneuver room, repeatedly returned to Greek shores despite mounting losses. The destroyer Diamond was sunk. The cruiser Gloucester was lost with heavy casualties. Transport ships were hit and damaged, yet the evacuation continued. Rearguard units held German forces away from evacuation beaches at terrible cost. At Kalamata, Australian troops fought until their ammunition was exhausted, then surrendered only when German tanks entered the town. At Porto Rafti, New Zealand soldiers held until the last boats departed. These rearguards knew they were sacrificing themselves to allow comrades to escape. By April 30th, Operation Demon concluded. Approximately 50,000 Commonwealth troops had been evacuated, a remarkable achievement given the circumstances. However, 13,000 British and Commonwealth soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured. All heavy equipment, vehicles, and artillery were lost. The evacuated troops carried only their personal weapons and whatever supplies they could carry. On April 20th, the Greek army in Epirus, still fighting Italians in Albania, surrendered to German forces to avoid surrendering to the Italians they had defeated. This decision reflected Greek pride. They would surrender to the Germans who had defeated them, not to the Italians they had beaten. German commanders, respecting Greek courage, allowed the surrender with full military honors. On April 23rd, the Greek government formally surrendered. King George II and his government evacuated to Crete, then later to Egypt, continuing the fight from exile. General Tsalakoglu signed the surrender agreement with German forces. 3 years of brutal occupation would follow, during which Greek resistance movements would fight courageously against Axis occupation. The Greek campaign cost Greece tremendously. Military casualties exceeded 15,000 killed and 220,000 captured. The economy was devastated. Subsequent occupation and resistance warfare would cost hundreds of thousands more Greek lives. The winter of 1941-42 would see catastrophic famine in Greek cities. The Holocaust would claim most of Greece's Jewish population. Liberation would not come until October 1944. The fall of mainland Greece left Crete, the large island south of Greece, as the last Allied stronghold in the region. Approximately 42,000 Commonwealth troops, including evacuees from Greece, defended the island alongside Greek forces. The British Royal Navy controlled the surrounding seas, preventing seaborne invasion. Hitler decided to seize Crete through airborne assault. Operation Mercury, launched on May 20, 1941, was the largest airborne operation attempted to that date. German paratroopers and air-landed mountain troops would capture Cretan airfields, allowing reinforcement by transport aircraft. It was audacious, unprecedented, and nearly catastrophic for German forces. The battle for Crete lasted 10 days. German paratroopers suffered appalling casualties in the initial drops, over 40% in some units. Allied forces, including Greek civilians fighting with whatever weapons available, decimated the first assault waves. For several days, the outcome hung in balance. German forces captured Malim airfield only through extraordinary courage and British command failures. Once Malim was in German hands, reinforcements poured in. Allied forces, lacking air cover and facing continuous aerial bombardment, could not retake the airfield. On May 31st, the final Commonwealth evacuation from Crete began. The Royal Navy lost 3 cruisers and 6 destroyers to German air attack during the evacuation. Over 17,000 Commonwealth troops were captured. Germany had conquered Crete, but the cost shocked Hitler. Over 6,000 German paratroopers were killed or wounded. Transport aircraft losses were devastating. Hitler, horrified by the casualties, forbade further large-scale airborne operations. The German airborne arm, once innovative and elite, would never again be used in its intended role. The Allies, observing German airborne success despite heavy losses, drew opposite conclusions and expanded their own airborne forces. The Balkans campaign had profound strategic consequences. For Germany, the conquest of Greece and Yugoslavia was complete. Axis forces now controlled the entire Balkan peninsula. German access to Romanian oil was secured. The southern flank for the coming invasion of Russia was protected. Italian honor was restored, at least superficially, though Italian military incompetence had been exposed. However, the campaign cost Germany precious time. Operation Marita and its aftermath delayed Operation Barbarossa by several critical weeks. Whether this delay cost Germany victory in Russia remains debated. German generals later claimed the postponement meant Wehrmacht forces reached the outskirts of Moscow just as winter struck, preventing capture of the Soviet capital. The argument is disputed, but the delay was real. For Britain, the Greek campaign was a costly failure. Over 15,000 Commonwealth casualties for no strategic gain, all equipment lost. The defeats in Greece and Crete undermined British prestige. The diversion of forces from North Africa allowed Rommel to achieve successes in Libya, yet Churchill never regretted the decision. Britain had honored its commitments. Greek courage had impressed the world. The moral and political value, in Churchill's view, outweighed military losses. For Greece, the campaign was catastrophic. The nation endured brutal occupation, famine, resistance warfare, and civil conflict. Over 300,000 Greeks died during the occupation years. Jewish communities were destroyed. The economy collapsed. Liberation in 1944 led directly into civil war. The scars of 1940-1944 shaped Greek politics for decades. The campaign demonstrated both German military excellence and its limitations. Wehrmacht combined arms operations, coordination of armor, infantry, artillery, and air power, proved devastatingly effective. German tactical skill, aggressive leadership, and superior equipment overwhelmed numerically comparable Allied forces. However, even German forces struggled in mountainous terrain against determined defenders. Rearguard actions and defensive positions in favorable terrain inflicted significant German casualties. Military analysts studied the Greek campaign extensively. The speed of German conquest, Yugoslavia in 11 days, Greece in 24, demonstrated blitzkrieg effectiveness even in difficult terrain. The importance of air superiority was reinforced. Luftwaffe dominance enabled German ground operations while crippling Allied mobility and logistics. The campaign validated several tactical principles. Mechanized forces could exploit breakthroughs to achieve operational-level victories even when infantry faced difficult terrain. Aggressive pursuit prevented defeated forces from establishing new defensive lines. Combined arms integration, particularly close air support for ground forces, multiplied combat effectiveness. For defenders, the campaign illustrated challenges of coalition warfare. Greek and British forces, despite courage and determination, struggled with coordination, different doctrines, and communication difficulties. The dependence on Yugoslav resistance, which collapsed immediately, showed dangers of defensive plans requiring Ally performance beyond their capability. The Greek civilian population's role was notable. Civilians assisted Allied forces, provided intelligence, and engaged in sabotage against German forces. The foundation of Greek resistance movements during occupation was laid during the 1941 campaign. Greek courage in 1941 became a source of national pride and resistance legitimacy. The German invasion of Greece in April 1940 was a foregone conclusion from the moment panzers crossed the Bulgarian frontier. Superior German forces, better equipped, fully motorized, with overwhelming air support, could not be stopped by exhausted Greek divisions and a small Commonwealth contingent lacking armor and air cover. The terrain, though favoring defense, could not overcome the disparity in military capability. Yet the campaign was not without meaning. Greek forces, despite inevitable defeat, fought courageously and imposed costs on German forces. Commonwealth troops, conducting fighting withdrawals and rearguard actions, demonstrated professional skill under impossible circumstances. The evacuation of 50,000 troops from Greece represented a significant achievement, saving forces that would fight again in North Africa and beyond. The campaign revealed Hitler's Balkans problem was self-created. Mussolini's incompetent invasion of Greece, which Hitler had neither requested nor desired, forced German intervention. The delay this caused to Barbarossa, though difficult to quantify precisely, was real. Resources committed to Balkans operations were unavailable for Russia. The paratroopers lost in Crete were never replaced. For Greece, April 1941 marked the beginning of dark years. Occupation, resistance, famine, and ultimately civil war would cost far more lives than the brief campaign against Germany. Yet Greek courage in 1941 remained a source of national pride. The Greeks had defeated one Axis power, Italy, and fought honorably against another, Germany, despite overwhelming odds. The statues at Thermopylae commemorate both ancient Spartans who held the pass against Persia and modern soldiers who fought there in 1941. The connection is deliberate, Greek courage transcending centuries. In 480 BC, 300 Spartans died to delay Persian invasion. In 1941 AD, thousands of Greeks and their Commonwealth allies fought to delay German conquest. Neither could prevent invasion, but both demonstrated that courage and sacrifice have value beyond victory. The German invasion of Greece was militarily inevitable but historically significant. It delayed Barbarossa, cost German resources, saved Allied lives through evacuation, and demonstrated Greek courage to the world. In the larger narrative of World War II, it was a brief campaign, quickly overshadowed by greater battles. But for those who fought there, and for Greece itself, the 24 days of April 1941 were defining, a moment when a small nation and its allies faced overwhelming force, and though defeated, emerged with honor intact.